Worship Bulletins. Glad that you've joined us today. My name is Dave Farnham, and I will be introducing our webinar today. Oh, I just jumped the screen there. Let me put my information back there so you can see all my contact information. I'm a software consultant here with Concordia Technology Solutions. Also joining with me and hosting today's webinar is Peter Frank. He's a senior manager of marketing here at Concordia Publishing House. You may have seen or listened to Peter in a previous webinar. He's hosted a lot of different webinars here for us. A little bit of housekeeping that we have for us today. We'll have approximately 50 minutes for presentation, followed by 10 minutes for questions. You can certainly ask questions throughout the webinar today. We'll be glad to answer them. And then the recording will be shared for everyone that's in attendance today, and even some that were not able to attend but did sign up. A few assumptions that we have as we come into today's webinar. One, that you have a familiarity with Lutheran Service Builder and that you're still using bulletins in some form or fashion there at the church. And you're probably looking to save a little time there in the church office with all the other tasks that you do there at the church. So tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm going to go ahead and pop up a few questions here for us. So the first question would be, just select the option that most clearly or closely identifies you and your role there at the church. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that here for us. So you should see that there on your screen. So we're seeing about a 60-40 split here between those, well, maybe a little bit less, between pastors and administrative or office managers. And all right, well, let's go ahead and I'm going to ask the second question here. Whoops, hang on just a moment. Sorry about that. Let me get the second question here. All right. Are you currently using Lutheran Service Builder there at the church? So it looks like most all of us are using it there at the church, but there are a few that are not using it there too. So we're glad to have each of you here. And then let me launch this second or this last one here. And then for those of you that are using it, what would you consider your level, your skill level to be? And as those have come in, it looks like most of us are at an intermediate or a novice level, but most are a little bit more at the intermediate, feel like they're at the intermediate level, and then novice as well. So I'm going to go ahead and close those out. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we're certainly glad to have each and every one of you here today. So we're going to continue on, talk about the outline of what we're going to be covering today. We're going to go over an overview of the software itself, and then we're going to look at planning a service. We'll look at editing the formatting, and then also creating bulletin templates. We'll look at exporting the content after we've created the service. You can certainly start a free trial at lutheranservicebuilder.com at any time. So for the few of you that are not using it, just go to lutheranservicebuilder.com. You'll see a blue button there that says Start Free Trial. You're welcome to do that at any time. In fact, that's probably on most of the pages there at lutheranservicebuilder.com. So without any further hesitation, let's go ahead and get started here with our webinar. And I'm going to bring in Peter and let him take it from here.
Thanks so much, Dave. I appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who's here. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Make sure that you can see this okay. You should be seeing just our basic calendar in Lutheran Service Builder. All right, so we've got that set up. I'll dig into that in just a moment, but first I want to talk about what Bulletins means today. So, I've made this presentation numerous times over the last few years talking about how to set up a bulletin. We'll go through the service rather quickly and show how to use the regular tools, changing elements, and all of that. I'll show you how to use our standard templates. That's all really basic, and we'll kind of breeze through that because what has changed is that as this COVID-19 pandemic has hit, we have had to rethink how bulletins work in the church. There's a number of different reasons. First and foremost is people aren't coming to worship in the same ways that they did before. Many churches are still doing live streaming, and no one is actually coming into the doors except maybe the pastor and the videographer, maybe the organist. Or if you are having people come into the church, I know at my congregation, it's at a worship or a registration level for worship only. You have to say you're coming, and then we sure hope you show up because we're giving assigned seats, and bulletins have changed in that too. Part of that reason is because we're not having volunteers coming into the church office and folding bulletins like we did before. And so all of the work is on our administrative assistant. And then for those who are still attending live, we've got this kind of hybrid situation where people are coming into the sanctuary and worshiping in person while also having other people worshiping live. So we've got multiple bulletins. That's where Lutheran Service Builder can really help you out. Because you are planning a single service, but handling a variety of different bulletin types, you are having additional work if you're doing that by hand. And I'm going to show you today how to use the tools in Lutheran Service Builder to make that process as efficient as possible. Now, throughout this whole presentation, I'm also going to show you some ways that you can tailor it to your needs that you might have from a more professional presentation standpoint. So we'll look at how do you change the styles? How do you match what you're doing elsewhere in other communications so that it feels like it's cohesive styles? So we're going to go through all of that, but the special focus today will be about planning one service and sharing the bulletin in a variety of different ways. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, I'm going to breeze through the first part, especially since so many of you are already using Lutheran Service Builder. I don't want to kind of just repeat things you already know too much. So we're going to look ahead. We're going to look at this August 23rd, the 12th Sunday after Pentecost. And so as you know, when you click on it, you get to the propers for the week. We're going to go up to the top right and say plan this service. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more for right now so you can see that. By the way, if you have any questions as I go ahead and put them in the chat. Dave's going to be following along, answering any questions that he can. And if there's any questions he can't, he's going to share them with me during our Q&A time, and I'll be happy to answer those as best as I can. All right, so here we are on our service plan. You should be all very familiar with that. This is where you can go and add hymns. You can see here on the right-hand side, I have hymns from Creative Worship. That's one of the things that you'll see throughout this is that I am subscribed to Creative Worship. You may not be, so you might see something a little bit different, but have no fear. Everything below that you're going to see. All right, so I'm just going to add a few hymns to my service plan just to get us started. I'll put the hymn of the day and then a hymn for the readings. Hymns for the readings are based on the propers for this week, not the readings that I might select. That's a common question. So let me just add one more. Oh, it looks like I'm doing a bunch that start with B. Here we go, Onward Christian Soldiers. Next, I'll add my order of service. And this is something that we could get into as well if we've got questions about that. I don't know about at your church, but at my church, we're doing a slightly abbreviated order of service. We're not doing as many hymns as normal. We're trying to reduce congregational singing. We've been doing a sermon series on Romans, and so the Romans readings and the gospel readings tie together, but we've been excluding Old Testament readings just to kind of keep that service a little bit more condensed because things like communion are taking longer. So there are ways you can customize your order of service to continually use those again and again. We'll look at that very briefly if we have time. And then I'm not going to worry about additional rights or notes at this time. If you have any questions about those, put them in the chat. But today we're all about preparing the bulletin. So now that I've got a very quick service plan put together, I'm going to click Prepare Bulletin in the top right. And that'll take me to a screen that I'm hoping you're pretty familiar with. But I'm going to walk you through some of the specifics in case you're brand new. If you look at the top left, we've got these tabs very similar to like Microsoft Word or some of the other word processing softwares. Now, this is not a word processor, and there's a really good reason for that. Well, probably two good reasons for that. First off, you are not creating content here. There are ways for you to create content within Lutheran Service Builder, but what you're doing here is I guess you'd say editing the content or modifying the content. Maybe a better verb would be placing the content. You see these different components here, these elements as we call them, are already complete. I can't click and start typing on most of them. So here we have the invocation, and you'll see when I click on this element, the tabs up at the top automatically select a new one called invocation. And if I go here to exhortation, then that changes that. We'll go down here to confession and absolution. So these tabs will appear as you have selected. Again, this is very similar to Microsoft Word. We've tried to be as familiar as possible. So these other tabs are kind of more global things. So the first one is the document tab. And you can see we have a bulletin format. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on that later, so I'm not going to get into that in too much detail now. Next, you have the order of service here. We're using Divine Service Setting 1. This is straight out of Lutheran Service Book. This is where you could tailor it to your church's need and create what we call a custom order of service. We're not going to look at that too much yet, but like I said, if we have time, we'll dig into that at the end. And then at the very far right, we have this new web view. I'm excited to show this to you. We'll look at that after we've looked at bulletin formats, so stay tuned. So we've got our elements here, and you can modify elements by clicking on them, by dragging and dropping them. You see we can change the placement, but that's really what this insert button up here, this insert tab is. So when you click on insert, it allows you to add other elements by giving you an entry point. So like if I wanted to add a second hymn at the beginning, here's the hymn of invocation. I click insert hymn. You can see all of these gray lines. They may be a little bit hard for you to see on the screen, but if I highlight over them, it turns blue. And it just allows me to place it. That's the easiest way to add a new element in there. And then once I click on that element, you'll see I have different options. So like I've got move here. So if I click move, it gives me that same experience of clicking and dropping. Now, why do we have that when we can just drag and drop? Well, in some cases, dragging and dropping can have a little bit of a delay, like you've seen here today. I don't know if you can tell, but I can certainly tell. Anytime I'm streaming, it slows my internet down a little bit, which means if you have slow internet, you might see a little bit of a delay as well. Also, when you're on like a tablet, sometimes it's easier to just do the clicks rather than the drag and drop, although drag and drop is certainly available for you there. So those are a few reasons for that. All right, so we've got our initial elements in here. Let's talk about different types of elements. Confession and absolution is what we call a heading. A heading is just text. It is really big text. Well, typically by default, it's really big text. We'll talk about changing that. But it's big text that basically describes the next section. And in the divine order, or divine service setting 1, we have confession and absolution, then the service of the word, and then we have the service of Holy Communion, or the service of the sacrament. Now, if you want to change those, all you have to do is double click on them, and then you can go and say Holy Communion if you wanted to change that phrase there. Now, if you want to change and add additional text there, so sometimes we have requests to say, I'd really like to show what the day in the church year is at the top. You could say insert heading and put it there. and say 12th Sunday after Pentecost. Whoops. And I'll lowercase that. And if I really wanted to match what I have up at the top there, I can type out 12th. And then maybe I don't actually show this heading. While it's nice to show those different services, sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. So I can go in here and actually delete those. I'll go down one more, service of Holy Communion. There we go. So that's one way you can use headers if you want. And this is where we get into the word processor just a little bit. All right, and then we're on this next element, which is a hymn. Now, I think most of you who are attending live today probably are very familiar with selecting new elements, but in case you're not, when you have something like a hymn, where it's a placeholder for selecting something that changes, that's when you'll get this sidebar pop up. Now, we've already selected a few hymns in our service plan, so we have those options over here on the right. When I select it, I have Built on the Rock, then it shows up there. Now, I've got another hymn here too. When I select this, it also shows hymns, and I'll put this in there. So we're singing 2 hymns in a row. Now, you might just take the default selection and run with it, but you can do more than just that, especially with hymns. You see, now that I've selected this hymn, it'll tell me the type hymn. This is Hymn of Invocation up at the top on that tab. But I have several different things here. Now I have the caption, which I can turn on or off. This caption right here, where it says 645 Built on the Rock, I can actually go in and type in there. And if I don't want to put the number, I can just say Built on the Rock, or maybe I call it Opening Hymn, Built on the Rock. I also have on the far right subcaption. Now, I want to clarify something. You can only have a subcaption if you have a caption. So think of that as kind of a single category. And I could do page here. We've got several different tags. So I could say Built on the Rock and then LSB 645. These captions here, like here I put hashtag PG hashtag, or if you're of an older generation, maybe it's the pound symbol, PG pound symbol, however you want to call it. We've got several options in there under subcaptions, and you can find out more about those by going into the Information Center and typing in subcaption. And I believe it is the Element tab. I could be wrong. I thought it would come up right away. Maybe that's not the right one. I'll have to. There it is. Creating a bulletin format. Here are those different subcaptions that you have options for. So when you go and you search for subcaption, just go to creating a bulletin format, and it's included in there. So just a few little tips and tricks there. So that's under caption, and you can, again, turn that on or off. Next, you have how this displays. So this hymn can be displayed as a text or a melody. Melody shows the music, and then none means go get your hymnal, open up LSB 645. We'll talk about that in a little bit, these 3 options there. Now, regardless of whether you select text or melody, you can choose which stanzas you want to show. And this is one of the really cool parts about Lutheran Service Builder. When you're using text and you want to remove a stanza or 2, it's pretty easy. You can do that in Word and just backspace and delete it. Or you can go in here and say, we're going to do 1, 3, and 5, and it automatically removes those for you. Well, what's really cool is that if you choose the melody, it will remove those as well. And it automatically does that with the images. It still looks great. Each one of these images, each one of these stanzas and the lines are individual images. So if I wanted to add 2 back in, I can just add 2, and it comes in real quickly. So again, that's just kind of standard. You probably know about that, but if you didn't, I'm sure that'll be very exciting for you. That's not the most exciting thing today. Don't worry, we've got more that I'm going to show you. Now, if you wanted to change this hymn, we have this edit button here. This edit button will allow you to take it into My Worship Resources. However, it doesn't work well. Well, it doesn't work. I should say, we restrict it when it's copyrighted. It's not that it's broken or anything. It's just that we restrict copyrighted materials. You can't change copyrighted materials. So we'll take a look at edit when we get down to something else later on. And then you've got your move and delete. So as you're going through each individual element, you could choose exactly how you want it to display on an element by element basis. Or if you're selecting a different bulletin format, it'll choose by default. That's what we're going to look at in a bit. But I'm going to keep going down here because I want to show a few more things as we get going. So depending on the order of service that you select, oftentimes the captions will be hidden by default. And you can turn them back on if you're interested in having them. It starts to take up some more space, but it's also a teaching tool to say, what are we doing right now? So it's your call whether you want to include that or not. That becomes, again, a formatting question. That's all it takes is to modify the formatting. Now, there are some element selections that you might need to choose. So like here, when you get into confession of sins, and then you have absolution, you have this little blue line on the left with an arrow. And when you click it, it goes to an option group. So this, I always use this as an example because it's a very practical kind of thing. At my church, we have vicars. We know that many churches don't because only a small percentage of our LCMS congregations receive a vicar each year. But a vicar, when he is leading a service, cannot pronounce absolution because he is not ordained yet. And so you might want him to go in here and select the Declaration of Grace. Now, if you don't call it out, many people won't notice that it's different until they get to that point. And so that's why sometimes people hide it. But you can put that caption there or hide the caption, however you want to do it. But when you go to this option group, you can see those choices. And you'll see that throughout. Here we can do the introit, or we can do a psalm, or another hymn. Down here we have Gloria in Excelsis, or this is the feast. So you'll see there's numerous option groups, psalms or a gradual. That's what those blue lines mean. All right. As you get into here, sometimes you'll get into an element like here, Gloria in Excelsis, where you could say it's text, or it's melody, or it's text and melody. So the assisting minister says, Glory to God in the highest, and then the congregation sings. All right, we'll keep going through here. Let's see, I want to get to one that I can edit. Well, this is a perfect one, Prayer of the Church. Now, Prayer of the Church is typically just a predefined spot where you can go and add your Prayer of the Church. But the LCMS office, which I think they call it worship office, they've changed the name a few times, but the worship office or department or whatever they're called puts together predefined prayers of the church. They put it together in a Word file. We take it from them with their permission, of course, and put it into a builder file. And then if you want to subscribe to that and have it automatically inserted in each service, you can. So you see right here, this is a predefined prayer of the church that is automatically applied and is the same that anybody else who uses this has. And you can do so by going up under Settings and Account Settings and going down to Subscriptions, Content Subscriptions, and you'll see I have Creative Worship there, but this is called Let Us Pray. And if you don't have that, you can click Add Subscription and subscribe to it. You can include it in the search or include it automatically or both. And then you get what I just showed you. You don't ever have to think about it. If there's one for that day in the church year, it'll automatically apply. So that's another cool thing. I think this is one that gets a lot of people excited because it saves quite a bit of work. It adds some variety. It adds some consistency. Like there's something really cool about the fact that all of these churches who use this are praying the same prayers. And when you say prayer of the church, capital C, the body of believers here on earth, that's pretty exciting. Now, you might want to add some special petitions. If you do that, you could, or to do that, all you have to do is right click and click edit, or click this edit button. Oops, actually, hang on. I haven't actually selected it. I'm still selecting Gloria and Excel sheets. Hang on, let me go back out of that. We'll try this one more time. I should have gone with the right click edit. There, I'm on Gloria and Excel sheets. Here you go. Prayer of the church. If I click edit, what it's doing is it's taking a copy of that and taking it into my worship resources under my prayers and allowing me to edit that. And so here, for those who meet with sudden death, and then it says, and especially for those who have requested our prayers, you could go in and say, remove these brackets, and say, including the Smith family, who are mourning the loss of their grandmother, Jane. And then you can remove these italics. There we go. And when I click save, it should reinsert it back. Now close out of there. So I saved it, close out of there, and there you go. See, I've modified that element, and I don't have to do that in Word. And that's really important as we get into other bulletin formats. If you typically say, well, I'm going to go ahead and modify it in Word after I export it, you might have to do that multiple times if you're exporting it in different ways. And so that's where this edit comes in. Now, if I want to go back to what was there originally, I still have that. Up here under Let Us Pray, if I click on that, it reverts back. Because down here under the bottom, under, let me go back a little bit. Prayer of the Church is the category. I have cloned it essentially and have a new one. So if I click Prayer of the Church, that is the one at the very bottom of the list. My most recent one will show up. It's part of my worship resources. Only I have access to this. So if you're following along at home, you won't be able to see that under your prayers. Even if you subscribe to Let Us Pray, you'll have this one, but not that one down below. So I encourage you to use that edit. Now, if you start to get my worship resources filled up, there's lots of ways you can manage that. You can file it, you can delete it. You know, we can talk about some of those options if you have questions with that. But I think it's really cool to be able to do that here with just a few clicks of a button. And now, however you modify the service, you don't have to do that outside. And by outside, I mean in Microsoft Word or whatever word processor you're using. All right, I think we're just about ready to get into formats for. If you have any questions, then I'll take a look. I see Kenny Loggins made it into the Service Builder. Kelly Smith is asking that. I know of the name Kenny Loggins, but I'm not familiar with what just showed up. So I'd be curious if I did something or someone else did, or there might be something I said that refers back to that. So, oh, the danger zone. There we go. Thank you. Yes, if you go up under settings, account settings, the team has called this danger zone, which is delete my account. Don't delete your account unless you really want to. We can't easily get it back. So thank you for explaining that, Kelly. Yep, that's the danger zone. Now I'm thinking, is that Top Gun? I don't know. That's before my time at the very least. All right, so we have our service kind of ready to go. There's some distribution hymns in here, hymn to depart, if we wanted to put those in. In fact, maybe we should, just to complete using our service plan. And there we go, Onward Christian Soldiers, and we'll add one more here. So just because I had it in the service plan doesn't mean I have to use it, and also it also doesn't mean I'm restricted to just those hymns. So we'll go here. All right, so now I have hymns everywhere. Some of those hymns have text. Some of those hymns have melody. So my format's kind of a little bit off. But I wanted to get to this point to say we've got one consistent service where all of the elements are selected. And if I wanted to, I could go straight up here, click Export to Microsoft Word. In fact, let's do that to show you where I'm at right now. So we are using the default bulletin format. And as soon as this opens up, it's on my other screen. I'll pull it in and hopefully you guys will be able to see it. I think I did it. Yeah, there you go. You can see my audience view. So first off, if you get this file that says, or this line up here, protected view, that happens when you download files. Just click enable editing. We can't prevent Microsoft from being a little concerned about that. Oh, good. And then there's my warning about my webcam. It says computer overload. I'm going to go ahead and hit ignore here. So you should still be able to see me and my screen. If something goes horribly wrong, it may be that I've overloaded my computer like my warning just said. So you'll see here, this is an 8.5 by 11 document. And my hymns take up quite a bit. If you click on these are individual images. And you can move them together. They did combine the stanzas and the melody into one image. So it looks okay, but when you think about it, are you going to print out a bunch of 8.5 by 11s looking at it portrait-wise? Probably not, maybe. We just gave that as a good editing format so that you could set up your service. But what typically happens is you will print this out and on single sheets of paper that you fold. Well, what size paper? How are you going to fold it? All of those things are good questions, and that's where bulletin formats comes into play. So in your settings up here, you have bulletin formats. You can also get to it by clicking under Document and next to Bulletin Format, this Edit button. You can also change it by just selecting the drop-down. Now, we've got a number of default templates. So Creative Worship is one of those. Creative Worship, if you've subscribed to it, has a very specific format that you'll probably be familiar with if you're familiar with Creative Worship. It uses Arial quite a bit. There, see, you look at that. It's very different than what we were showing before. Now, this is also an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. All I had to do, I switched the format. I can go and download that one now. And I'll show you what that looks like. We'll go to second to open. There you go. So with just a click of a button, I have, here, we'll compare it side by side. So here's the exhortation and confession of sins. As I scroll down, look at that. Invocation is on a different page. It shows, rather than P and C, it spells out pastor and congregation. We got the subcaption the same, but everything is in a different font. If you don't like the default options, we don't blame you. Well, you put them there as kind of generic options. You might have one that's unique to you. I recommend going and creating your own. So we'll go up here, go to Bulletin Formats. So Settings, Bulletin Formats. And the first thing you want to do is go to New Format down in the lower left-hand corner and say, what is it based on? Is it based on Creative Worship? Is it based on the large print or just the default? I suggest just go with default. And we'll call this Webinar 0818, a really creative name there. All right, so you'll see what's in here is what we were looking at the beginning. I get to see this just as a preview. This is not what we put into the bulletin. You can tell by the hymns. You can tell that it's not a complete order of service. It's just showing a few options so that you can see how it's going to look. Now, on the right-hand side, you have 3 tabs. The first tab is really your style sheet. This gets into appearance, period. Then it gets into layout. This gets into printing. So how do you want this to print in the physical world? And then finally, content. Content is how the individual elements are displayed, or even are they displayed? So let's take them one by one. First off, the most important part of a bulletin format is your body. So your body section is number 1. And right now it's set to Times New Roman. Now, you might have a font that you are very used to. When I think about my home church, they use WordPerfect for years and years. And I don't know what the name of that font is, but I know it when I see it. And it's everything that my home church used. It was very consistent. So I recommend using a consistent font, whether you're doing bulletins or newsletters or your website or your business cards or your letterhead, any of those things, use a consistent font. Now, my favorite font is called Roboto. Let me pull that down. You'll notice, actually, let me do one that's here first. We'll go to, let's just do Century Gothic to start. Now, this is a very modern and lightweight font, and it's hard to read. It works good for like single words, maybe some logos, but it doesn't look really good in print. And you can see that in the example when you select it. But one of the things about Century Gothic is that it is a font that is commonly available, just like Arial or Times New Roman or Helvetica or any of those kind of things. Fonts come in a variety of shapes and sizes. There's a type of font that's called a web font that you are able to utilize if you download it to your computer. Now, websites like this font, where you look up at bulletin format, just that header, or all throughout Lutheran Service Builder is a font called Lato, L-A-T-O. It's a web font. Most people don't have that on their computer. And if you're going to download this to your computer, print it, which if you're going to do bulletins, you're going to do, you have to have that font on the computer. And so we can't necessarily query your computer and say, what fonts do you have? But we can run a bunch of guesses and say, hey, do you have this font? And if it returns it and says yes, then we show it. So if you see fonts on this list, you can use it. But if you don't see the font on the list and you know you have it on the computer, you can type it in. So like Roboto is one of the ones that I like to use, but apparently I don't have it on my computer anymore. Let's try Lato. There you go. See, Lato, when I type it in, my computer or Builder is asking my computer a question that says, do you have Lato? If I type in just L-A-T, it says, well, no, we can't find that. But L-A-T-O shows up. So we'll select it. And there you can see it looks very similar to the rest of Builder. We'll go with that today. Now I have a few other options here. I can change the font size. I can make it, well, we'll make it a little bit bigger. I can change if it's bold or not. We don't need to do that. I don't recommend doing any of these three for body. You can make it all caps. You can make it lowercase. I don't recommend those either, at least for body. And you can change the color, but again, that's not really good for the body. So let's just stick with that. Now you also have the ability to center it or make it align right or justify. Stick with left for body. And then I recommend not having an indent, but that's just my personal preference. Now you also have some spacing that you can do. Well, that's where the indent comes in. This was spacing to the left. If you do a little bit of spacing to the top, that works out okay, but it actually puts it in between paragraphs. So we're going to leave that at 0. You can change the line height if you want, give a little bit of breathing room. You can start to make it look a little bit different by selecting these options. So let's go into heading next. We're going to go in heading, type in Lato. And I may make a heading extra big and extra bold. And this one I might go with a dark blue color. There we go, just to set it apart. And that spacing looks pretty good. If I wanted to put text before or after, like if I wanted to put the cross in there, you could do that. And then let's go into caption. Caption is right here before the hymns. Same kind of thing, we'll do Lato, but we'll make it a little bit bigger. And while it's already bold, we'll leave that there. If I wanted to make it all caps, I could. I don't really like that appearance or how that looks. But I do want to add some spacing after it. And so I'll go here to after, and that way I can separate it out from the body. And then, yeah, we'll go ahead and keep that. Let's go to subcaption. You see down here, subcaption is on the right. We'll go ahead and make that lato as well. And we'll just leave it alone at that. It's italicized, which is fine. We'll go into rubrics. You see here, these are in italics right now. I like using one font across my whole bulletin and using other formats like that. So there's a rubric, we'll make it 11. And rubrics are really good to be red, or in this case, more of a maroon, a darker red. All right, next up, copyrights. The last thing here, you see copyrights right there. It's really kind of hidden. You want it to be not hidden, but out of sight. I'm going to make it 8, make it italicized, remove the indent, and add a little bit of spacing before just to keep it out. And I might make that a grayish color. There you go. So it's still there. It's still readable. It's just not front and center. Or we could make it all the way on the far right, but that kind of looks weird. I'm just going to keep it on the left. All right, so there is that format. Now, like voting in Chicago, I always say, click Save early and often. We're going to go ahead and move to layout. That's probably not the best time joke as I think about it with everything going on with voting. I apologize for that. But then I'm from Chicago originally, and there's always jokes about voting there. So that comes out first and foremost. I did not mean to make a joke about the current political climate. All right, we've got next under the layout here, we've got page size. This is the actual piece of paper that you're going to print on. So if you are doing, a lot of people use a letter format or maybe a legal 8.5 by 14, and they turn it landscape and then they fold it. This is a pretty common format. Now, when you look at it, there's a few things to keep in mind. First off, it's going to show you a single page. Just know that it'll print out, two-sided on the page in a booklet format. If you click folded. If you don't click folded, then it's going to show you the whole page. So you want to make sure to click that. You've got some different options for margins there. A 1/2 inch is usually pretty good for that size. And then you've got some things for music. Now, I recommend just putting automatically scale unless it's really large. We'll look at that in a second. We'll come back to that. But you select the actual paper and say, I want it to be, when I print it out, it's going to be landscape and folded or not. We'll talk about some options in a few minutes. Now we go into content. And this is where you get to say, these individual elements, do they show up? And if so, how? So we have headings in there with blue. If you don't want headings to show up, just uncheck the box. They won't show up at all. Do you want rubrics to show up? Well, if not, uncheck the box. Hymns, do you want them to show up? Well, if not, uncheck the box, but you probably do. That doesn't necessarily mean you want all the content to show up. You may just want to reference it, or you may want it to show up and show up with the music. Now, a second ago, I said we'll come back to that under layout. If we select melody here and go to layout, you can see that it's taking the actual image size. But if we go to automatically scale, it's making it larger. Now, I personally prefer that. I think it looks better to show it all the way across. And if you're doing something like this, where it's a half legal sheet, it's never going to be too big. If you're doing, an 8.5 by 11, it might get to be a little bit large there. So you've got to look at how it prints. But by default, we're going to show the music and we're going to scale it automatically. Now, you can't change the font on hymns. They're all images, so we can't change those easily. Then you get to say, well, what do we show for the caption? Do we say by default what the service says it should be? Do we say always, or just never show it? Just go ahead saying you don't need to know the title. That's your call. I'm going to go with default. Then caption name. All right, we're showing a caption. Do we say the name or the role, like hymn of invocation, or both? Hymn of invocation is 655. Then on the far right, do you show the stanzas or do you show the page? I'm going to go with stanzas. And again, this goes back to what I showed earlier. You can find that in your help system. And then stanza numbers. You can't take numbers off of the melody because they're images. But if you show the text, you can take them off there. All right, liturgy has a lot of those same options, and I apologize. I'm starting to rush because I'm seeing my time. We may go into the We might go into some of the Q&A time just so I can show everything. So liturgy, you have that there. You can do on some liturgy, you also have the harmonization in place. There's a whole discussion about harmonization. Don't know if I have time for that today, but I may be able to get into that in the Q&A. So you have some of these same kind of things where you show the default caption, or you always show it regardless of what the order of service says, or you never show it. So each order of service from Lutheran Service book has a different kind of default. And then you can say, do you use symbols for speakers or do you use the text? Again, that's your choice. Some people get confused by the symbols. And then propers, such as the readings. If there is melody, do you show that? If there's harmonization, do you show that? Or do you just show the text? Do you show the caption? Or again, go by like the default of what the service book says, always or never. Caption format, do you show the role and the name, or do you just put the role and the reference as the subcaption as we have here? There's chant pointing options, there's verse numbers, there's showing the headings from the ESV, or the words of Christ in red. All of those things are different options. And again, it's up to you to decide. But what you're doing for this specific format, Webinar 0818, is going to say this is always the default. So I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to export this, and then we'll show a few variations. So going back to my bulletin, I still have the creative worship one. But if I go to document and click the drop down, there's my webinar 0818. When I select it, there we go. Now, it was a quick update. That's where the heading was showing. But when I click outside of it, then it disappears because in this bulletin format, headings aren't shown. Now, some of these things like opening hymn built on the rock, that was an override. The override that I put in place always takes over it. And if I go down, you can see some of these other options. Now that's looking pretty clean. You'll say, well, Peter, why aren't you showing any of those page breaks? You set the page size to be 8.5 by 14 folded in half. Well, that's because we don't actually split the pages until we export it. So let's go ahead and export it. DocX, it's going to download. I'm going to open it. Same service, I haven't changed any of my elements. How they export now looks different. So let's pull it up and compare. Look at that, quite a bit different, same kind of information. To me, this is looking very familiar because I'm used to an 8.5 by 14 bulletin. You want to make sure that your page setup, so we want to print on, well, this printer, let me go to an actual printer. You can print on both sides, but I want my page setup to be book fold. It'll try to default to it, but based on the folding, but it may not depending on your printer and your print driver, all of that. So that's something to look at. Go ahead, print a test copy before you print 100 of them. See how it looks. But the folding, while you set it in Builder, you want to make sure that it comes across on your word processor. Each word processor is different and they change things from time to time. Most of the time it works just fine. I haven't heard too many issues of it not working in the last couple of years, but we used to have a problem with that. So there's that service. You can see there's the words of Christ in red. All this stuff. All right. What if you are doing a worship service in today's climate where you don't have anybody to fold it, and so you say, how about we make it one page? Well, the best way to do that, what my church is doing, is it's taking an 11 by 17 page and folding it in half and making sure it all fits on those 4 pages or 4 sides. You can do that by going back up here to bulletin formats, taking the one you just did, clicking copy this format, and say this is large 1 page. So the only thing I need to change here is to say layout, change it from legal side to ledger side size, and then do landscape, and it's still folded. Well, that's pretty big. There's a few other things I might do. Let me go ahead and save that. When I go back to my bulletin and I change this to large one page, you'll notice how it gets bigger. Now my hymns have expanded. How many pages is this? Let's go ahead and export it. I'm guessing it's more than 4. Give it a second. All right. Where's my page? 18. Whew. Well, we've got some work to do if I'm going to get it down. Notice here, the best things that we could do is remove the music. That takes up a lot of space. So I'll close this and I'll go in here under settings and bulletin formats. Now I could go hymn by hymn and remove it, but that's going to take me some time. If I go here, I go to layout, content, and I go to hymns, I could say, I don't want to show the hymns. I just want to say hymn of invocation, or like the roll, the name, and the stanzas. And then I'm going to show text for the liturgy. And I'm going to show, I already show it for the liturgy here. That's going to reduce my size quite a bit. So I'll hit save. I'll go back out of here, let it refresh, and see how much shorter. Give it a second. Hopefully I did that on the right one. Oh, this one I had overwritten originally. So we'll go to text. I think these two I overwrote. Let's see. Yeah, just anywhere that I overwrote it before. And that's back to just text. Shorter and shorter, but if I need to reduce more, it takes up quite a bit. Well, what page number is it that we're referencing? Or maybe you just say, well, Nicene Creed is on back cover. Put it there. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because many churches right now are not using printed bulletins. So you may not want to are not using hymnals. You may not want to reference the hymnal. But I hope this shows you how you can create one service and use different formats. Let me show you WebView next. WebView is a new thing. It shows up under Document. When you click on it, it says Enable WebView. We'll click on that button. Maybe click again, make sure it took. There we go. So now I have a link. If I copy this link, right-click it, or click Control-C, copy it. I go into a web browser. Let me hide all my bookmarks. I should have done that before. And paste this in. Let me show you what this web view looks like. And then we'll talk about how you use it. So this unique URL shows your church name, the name of the service, the date, and then down below it has your bulletin in your format. And it's just live, like it's on the website. It's a unique link that no one else could guess, but it shows the exact bulletin you just created. But what's nice about it is that it responds. So you see, if I want to pull it up on my phone, I can. It'll look nice on my phone. Now, what if I make a change? What if I go and select the hymn of the day and we're going to sing Built on the Rock again? See, it's telling me it's already used. That's okay. We'll go ahead and show the text. If I refresh my web view, it won't show anything. But if I go to Document Web View, you see I got a little red dot. And when I click on it, it says your service has changed since the web view was updated. Let's update the web view. So we click Update Web View. Now, when I get back to my web view and I hit refresh, it shows. So there's two things we'll show that it shows here. Here we go. Hymn of the day, 645. So that's web view. But what are you going to use this for? Well, I can think of two ways of using it right off the bat. One, if people are watching your service live, they're probably not going to have access to a printed bulletin. They might have to print it themselves, or you could give them a link to this and they can pull that up on their phone or their tablet or their computer. So that's the first use. The second use is if you are streaming your service, you could pull up this web view and show it on screen so that people can follow along. And then as you're going through, you just move it, and it's like having a real bulletin in front of you. So you almost do like a split screen. On 1/3 or a quarter of it, it's the bulletin, and on the other side, it's the live video. All right, well, I'm about 4 minutes before time. We've got some questions in there. So I'm going to stop right now because I could talk about this all day. And I'm happy to stick around if you have more questions than we have time for, since I cut it so short. But Dave, I'd like to pass it back to you now so that we can cover a few more things and then get back into the Q&A time. So thanks so much for letting me show this to all of you. I'll be back in a couple minutes.
All right, thank you, Peter, for showing us some more of the Lutheran Service Builder. I'm just going to cover a few different things. Hopefully you'll be able to see my screen on your screen, and that is it's showing the pricing of the Lutheran Service Builder. Now, I know a majority of us are already using the Lutheran Service Builder, but for the few that aren't, you should be able to see the Lutheran Service Builder and the pricing. It's all based upon your average weekly attendance. So you'll see that the first year is a little bit higher price, and then it does definitely go down each subsequent year on your renewal. So it's all based upon that, and it's tiered according to your weekly average attendance. The hymn license is also the same way. It's based upon that hymn license is on your weekly average attendance as well. So you'll see that there. That does consistently stay the same. Now, one thing I do want to point out, and this is really helpful for a lot of different churches, and this hymn license will give you copyright permission for the use of nearly all the hymns in the Lutheran Service Book. I'd say just about 99% of them. There are a few exceptions that we do let you know about, but nearly 99% of the hymns that are in the Lutheran Service Book are covered. And you'll want to make sure you have that. I'd say, gosh, probably 90, a very, very high percentage, 95% of churches probably have the hymn license as well. The Concordia organist, this is what you're seeing on your screen right now. This is really important for a lot of different churches. Why? Because this is a built-in subscription into the Lutheran Service Builder, giving you access to being able to export out the songs that are professionally recorded by an organ. So you got all of your music, and you can play them, and you can choose, as Peter was showing you, hey, we only want to sing the first, second, and fourth stanza. And then you can actually do that as well with the song selection. So you can export out just the song. So if you don't have someone to be able to play the organ, or someone is going to be on vacation, you don't have a backup, you can actually use this and play this, and everything is going to be in the same order of service that you have, and you'll be able to just play them from your sound system. They come out in MP3s. So it just makes it very simple and easy. You can imagine if you have to pay someone to come in 2 to 3 times or more a year, this definitely makes it worthwhile, and makes it very cost effective for you to be able to have an option and to be able to use that. Think of all the different services per year, and then the special services, and then maybe even funerals as well. So a lot of different opportunities you have this, and you can use it as often as you need to. Again, my contact information is on the screen here, so if I can be of further assistance to you, answering questions that you might have, dave.farnham@cph.org, or softwaresales@cts.cph.org. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring back in Peter, and we're going to tackle some of those questions. I know we have a question from Michael that he put on there. And then also Dave made a question as well. And we're going to take a look at those two questions. And then if you have any additional ones, go ahead and put them in there, and we'll answer them right away.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Dave. I'm going to actually ask if you can make me the presenter again, or maybe I can just take.
Oh, definitely. Yep. Let me go ahead and do that.
All right. So the first question, while Dave is doing that, the first question from Michael says, is there a tool for adding external content, such as a sermon outline in the bulletin? There are different tools, and depending on your current situation, you might want to do it in different ways. So let's see here. There we go. All right, I'm going to share this screen again. So let's use the example of the sermon outline. If you are only exporting your service once and then printing your bulletin, the easiest way to do that is to just do it in Word. And I'm guessing that's probably what you're already doing, Michael. But if you're going to do what I showed today, where you have multiple bulletin formats and you want to add some unique content, what I would suggest is using a common element from my worship resources. And this is not, I'll say this is not a fantastic solution, but it works. So if you go here to element, you can insert an element there. Now, if you already have this saved from a previous time, a sermon outline, you're going to use once, and that's where this isn't ideal. But if you add something like a standard prayer or things like children's message, what you can do is go under My Worship Resources and go to My Common Elements and add a common element. Let's call this Sermon Outline 0823. You can actually go in here and say point 1, point 2, point 3. We'll just go ahead and click Save. I can then, we'll close out of here. Sorry, everything goes a little bit slower when I'm presenting live. If I want to, it should show up at the bottom of my list. I can put in sermon outline right there. Oh, and I didn't even put a title in. I could say, just click in here and say sermon outline if I wanted to. And then regardless of how I export it, it'll show up. The downside to this, and it's not terrible, but the downside is that will always be there for you. Now, you could make it an undated sermon outline and then just go update it every week if you wanted to. That's another option. But like I said, it's not fully a word processor, and that you just can't go and start typing in between things, because everything is a unique element and it has the formatting based on the type of element it is. But that would be my suggestion for how you do that, is My Worship Resources. Now, Dave, not the Dave who's leading our presentation today, asks, is there a forum or Facebook group for users to share experience specifically with Service Builder? Well, we do. If you go into our information center and you go to, say, visit our online help center, it'll open up in a new window, our help center, where you can find all sorts of answers to questions. We have community and feedback. And I'll warn you, it's not super active. We've got get support from the community or product suggestions. If you go in there, you can go ahead and make suggestions, and we do review these. There's just not a lot of discussion going on. But maybe you guys are the ones who will start that discussion and interact back and forth. We don't have a Facebook group at this time for Builder. Just because we have this option, most of our conversations happen through our phone center or through email. But if you would like to encourage others to use this and have that community of actual users and not just our support team, then I would encourage people to go here to that community. All right, the next question, Susan has a question about creative worship. And then I saw a follow-up that you couldn't see what I typed in there. So let me show you something real quick. There might be some disconnect with your account, which is why you don't see it. But Susan asked the question, can we just bring up the entire creative worship service, or do we have to copy and paste the different sections into one service into one of the service options that are given? Well, you can if your account is set up correctly. When you click on order of service up here, it's going to pull in the service for this week. So if I click 12th Sunday after Pentecost, it's going to overwrite everything. So be careful. If you don't want to do this, I'm going to go ahead and change it. It's going to overwrite everything that I've already done. And so you can see now, oh, actually it doesn't overwrite. No, it does, because the hymns are pre-selected. We've got all of this in place now. And so it's a different service entirely, but it's all the individual elements. Now, if you don't have this turned on and you think you should, contact our support team, or you can contact Dave. Dave can look at it for you, because it may be that you ordered a quarter of it and you need to subscribe. It's only for subscribers of Creative Worship, and that is an additional fee of $60 a quarter. There's a lot that comes with that, but it is an additional fee. All right, so I hope that helps you out, Susan. I'm guessing if you don't see that under order of service, then something's not set up right with your account. Michael asked, well, more of a statement. I really like how the Concordia Organist MP3 files auto-adjust to match the stanzas selected. And that's not part of our presentation today, but he brings up a very good point that if you are, some of these hymns are very long and maybe you only use 2 or 3 stanzas, it'll just give you the exact number of stanzas that you need. And it's really just a great replacement if you don't have an organist for a Sunday or ever, and you need some professionally played organ music. All right, and let's see. Michael said, yep, this is what I kind of mentioned. Exporting to Word is what we're currently doing, but it wouldn't work if we're going to use the web view. Going back to the adding elements, and that's where that common element comes into play. So this whole pandemic hit us rather quickly. It hit everybody quickly, not just us. But one of the ways we reacted, and we still have some ways to improve, is that web view. We introduced the web view right before Easter. And when I say right before, it was Maundy Thursday that we released it. Not really early enough in time to use for Easter, but we tried to get it out as soon as possible. And we'd love feedback on how to use that. And it sounds if you're using the web view, you probably have started it. That's one of those things where common elements becomes more important. So we've started to look at the idea of a one-time element, meaning you add it to the service and never again. Now we're a little ways from doing it. There's a lot of complications that come with that. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to do it. So it'll be a time before that actually is implemented, if we do end up implementing it. But it's for situations like you're describing. And that's just become so much more necessary in today's world than it was previously. All right. So Dave Farnham, I think I've got everything answered from the Q&A. Do you have anything that I missed or that you'd like to add?
I don't. I think that's pretty much wraps it up here for today as far as what I have. And anything else, Peter, that you wanted to add in?
No, I'll go ahead and cancel my presenter view or make you the presenter again so you can show that contact information one last time.
Okay, sure.
So I just
all right.
sent it back over to you. That way, if anybody has any questions, they know who to reach out to.
Sure. So you should have my contact information there on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me if you do have any additional questions in regards to the Lutheran Service Builder, or you can reach out to our software support team. I don't know that I have their information in here, but for those of you that are already subscribers to that, if you do need assistance, then you can certainly call our support team at 800-346-6120. I'll repeat that again so you have time to write that down. The support team, for those of you that are subscribers, it would be 800-346-6120. Again, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. It's been our pleasure and privilege to show this to you. And thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful week ahead of you. And you continue to use Lutheran Service Builder for your weekly services. And for those of you that aren't using it right now, we hope that you'll continue to dig in, start that free trial at LutheranServiceBuilder.com, and we look forward to servicing you and your needs as well. Thanks again. Have a great day, and on behalf of Peter and our Concordia Technology Solutions and CPH. Again, have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for attending today's webinar.